Okay, this is part one of a series of educational videos with regards to the representation of the People's Act, and today we are focusing on the transfers. Transfers mean changing of address from one constituency to another constituency, and according to the RPA, subsection 36 and 37 address this matter of transfer. Transfer can be external as well as internal. Let's start with the external transfers, meaning moving from one constituency to another constituency. And I want to read specifically what the RPA provides. It says, not later than 7 days after the publication of the preliminary register or quarterly list, a person whose name appears in any register for a constituency who has changed his address to an address in another constituency shall notify the supervisor of elections of such a change in Form 8 in the schedule. And Form 8 is referred to as change of residence form. And if the supervisor of election is satisfied that the person is ordinarily resident in that other constituency, he shall, as soon as the person has completed 6 months ordinary resident in such other constituency, cause the person's name to appear in the appropriate quarterly list for that other constituency. So let's make this simplified. So you are living in one constituency and you decide that you have moved to another constituency where you are now residing, and you wish to do a change of residence. A number of important things must be satisfied. Firstly, you must make that request. So transfers are on request. So nobody can move you or should move you to another constituency unless you have requested that. The second thing that is important, you must have lived in the new constituency or the constituency that you are seeking to be transferred to for a period of 6 consecutive months. You cannot do 2 and 4. 2 and 4, we know that is equal in 6, but you have to do all 6 consecutively. Once you have done that, that request would be then made to the registering officer. The registering officers within the constituency that you are seeking to be transferred. Let's explain that further. So you are living in East Kingston. That's where you had your first registration done. But subsequently you have built in Camden Park. And some parts of Camden Park are in the South Leeward constituency. So you will then go to South Leeward where you are now residing, ensuring that you have been there for the last 6 years, and from what you have indicated, you have built there since 2005. So you know you've been there for a period of time now. You go to South Leeward where the registration is being done. There are various registration centers located in South Leeward. For example, you have the Kittels Learning Resource Center. You have the Vermont or the Retreat Community Center. You have the Rillan Hill Community Center. You have the Clare Valley Government School, and you have the Bethel High School there in Camden Park. Any of those centers, and the dates and times are announced on our website, and you can get that information from the registering officer. You can get that information from our office. So you show up to one of those centers. You indicate to the registering officer, I am seeking to be transferred to South Leeward. I'm now living or I am now resided in Camden Park. The registering officer will check for where your registration was before. And on establishing where you were registered before, the registering officer will fill that change of residence form, give it to you, and give you instructions specifically to take it to a justice of the peace. A justice of the peace who knows you from the South Leeward constituency. Now, I know that there are times when persons would say, I don't know no justice of the peace. Well, the justices of the peace cannot be from the East Kingston, where you were living before. The justice of the peace cannot be somebody who arbitrarily meets you on the street of Kingston, or somebody who you knew while you were going to school, or you engage at your church. It has to be somebody who lives in the South Leeward constituency, who can vouch, who can certify that I know that you've been living there for the period of 6 months. And I want to make a plug here that if justices of the peace willfully, knowing that the person does not live there, and swear that they're living there, they're committing an offense. The very fact that they're called justices of the peace, it means they are given responsibility to preserve justice and to look out for the whole legal aspect of things in the country. So the justice of the peace have what we refer to as the burden of proof. They must certify. And on that form that you're taking to the justice of the peace, which is called Form 8, or the change of residence form, the justice of the peace must write on that form that says, I have known Sylvester King to have been living there, and the period of time, it cannot be less than 6 months. That must be on the form, because if that is not on the form, anybody can just sign a form for you. That must be written on the form. It must be clear, and it must say exactly the period of time. Now, once that form is signed and is returned to the registering officer, and everything else is intact, the process continues. So it is only on the return of that form will the registering officer proceed on completing the registration and the transfer. After you have completed that process, the next time the quarterly list is printed, your name will now appear on the quarterly list for the South Leeward constituency, and no longer on the East Kingston's list. So we want to spend some time now looking at internal transfers, or what we refer to as change of name of address in the same constituency. And the law speaks to this in subsection 37 of the RPA. It says, not later than 7 days after the publication of the preliminary register or a quarterly list, a person whose name appear in any such register or list who has changed his address within a constituency, or who has changed his name, may notify the supervisor of election in Form 8 or 9. And Form 8 is referred to as a change of residence form. And so if you are moving from one address to another address within the same constituency, that is also a transfer that is being done. Now let's amplify that, or let's make that clearer. You live in North Leeward. We know the geographical spread of North Leeward. So North Leeward has several villages. Let's take one, for example, Spring Village. You're living in Spring Village. That's where your registration was done initially. But then subsequently you moved down to Fitzhugh, where you got one of the low-income houses or whatever that you built there, and because of that change, you want to make your address more current. That can be done, and that's an internal transfer. And what would be the benefit of having such an internal transfer? Certainly, if an election should be called, rather than having to go back to Spring Village where you had your first registration done, you are now going to be in a polling division which would have polling stations closer to where you now reside. So in Fitzhugh, you will be in a polling division in Fitzhugh, which will be closer to where you now reside. So that benefit is really an important one. Again, it must be underscored that there is nothing that says you have to move. You could remain in Spring Village as long as you want. But for the expediency of having to be closer to a polling division on election day, you can see the benefit that one can derive. So transfers could either be external, moving from one constituency to another constituency, or they can be internal, where you're moving from one address one place of residence inside of the constituency to another place of residence in that same constituency. The burden of proof is always going to be placed on the justice of the peace when you are moving from one constituency to another constituency. So I think those are the basic steps that one need to follow, and if you're in doubt, you continue to check it out. You always can call the office. You can reach us at 784-457-1762, or you can even send us an email at electoraloffice@gov.vc, and we will be very delighted to provide you further guidance and further information.